Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. What if I told you that a simple penny sitting in your pocket right now could be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime? More than a luxury mansion, more than a fleet of sports cars. We're talking about a fortune that could change everything. Most people glance at their loose change and see worthless copper, but there's a coin from 1950 that collectors are willing to pay an absolutely staggering $351 million for. Yes, you heard that right. $351 million. The 1950 sweet penny isn't just a coin. It's a piece of American history that slipped through the cracks of time and landed in the hands of a very lucky few. And today I'm going to reveal exactly why this particular penny has numismatists, collectors, and investors around the world losing their minds trying to get their hands on one. Now, before we dive deep into the incredible story of this 1950s beauty, I need you to stick around because after we uncover every secret about this coin, we're going to talk about another penny that's worth over $100 million, and then another worth $73 million, and finally one valued at $61 million. These aren't just numbers. These are life-changing discoveries that could be hiding in your attic, your grandparents' old jars, or even in the change you got from the grocery store yesterday. So make sure you watch till the very end because you absolutely need to know what to look for. Let's talk about 1950, a year when America was recovering from World War II, the economy was booming, families were moving to the suburbs, and the San Francisco Mint was working overtime producing millions upon millions of wheat pennies to keep up with the nation's demand for currency. The wheat penny, officially called the Lincoln cent, featured Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and two graceful wheat stalks on the reverse, a design that had been in circulation since 1909 and was beloved by Americans everywhere. The San Francisco Mint, marked by that distinctive little S mint mark below the date, was one of three major mints producing these coins, alongside Philadelphia and Denver. But what makes the 1950s so incredibly special and valuable isn't just its age or its mint mark, it's the errors, the rarities, and the absolutely pristine condition examples that have survived nearly 75 years of circulation, wear, and the passage of time. You see, during the minting process in 1950, several extraordinary things happened that created variations so rare that finding one today is like winning the lottery 10 times over. First, there were the double die errors, where the die used to strike the coin was slightly misaligned, creating a doubling effect on Lincoln's features, the date, or the lettering. These doubled coins are extremely rare because most were caught during quality control and melted down, but a handful escaped into circulation, and those specimens today can fetch astronomical prices. Then, there were the off-center strikes, where the blank planchet wasn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a coin with part of the design missing and a curved clip along one edge. Collectors go crazy for these because they represent a genuine mistake from the mint, a moment frozen in time when something went wrong on the production line. But here's where it gets even more interesting. There were also reports of wrong planchet errors, where a wheat penny design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a dime or even a quarter, creating a coin that's the wrong size, wrong weight, and absolutely priceless to collectors who specialize in error coins. The 1950s wheat penny in perfect, uncirculated condition with full red luster is already extremely valuable on its own. We're talking about a coin that never touched human hands after leaving the mint, that was carefully stored away in protective holders, that retained every single detail of Lincoln's hair, the wheat stalks, and the lettering with razor-sharp precision. These pristine examples are graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect. And when a 1950s wheat penny grades at MS68 or higher with full red color, that's when the value skyrockets into the millions. There's a famous story among coin collectors about a man in California who inherited his grandfather's estate in the early 2000s and discovered a dusty old safe in the basement. Inside that safe were rolls and rolls of uncirculated wheat pennies from the 1940s and 1950s, carefully preserved in their original mint wrappers. And among those rolls was a single 1950s penny with a dramatic double die error graded MS69 red that eventually sold at auction for an amount that made international headlines and changed that family's life forever. The Wheat Penny series itself holds a special place in American numismatic history because it represents an era of simplicity, of honest American craftsmanship, of a time when a penny could actually buy you something meaningful, and collectors today are drawn to these coins not just for their monetary value, but for the connection they provide to the past, to their grandparents' generation, to a simpler time in American history. The 1950s specifically represents the tail end of the wheat penny era. Just 9 years later, in 1959, the design would change to the Lincoln Memorial reverse that we recognize today, making these wheat pennies the last of their kind, the final chapter in a 50-year run of one of America's most iconic coin designs. When you hold a 1950s wheat penny in your hand, especially one in exceptional condition, you're not just holding copper and zinc, you're holding a tangible piece of post-war American optimism, of California's booming economy, of the craftsmanship of mint workers who took pride in their work even though they were producing millions of these coins every single day. The auction records for high-grade 1950s wheat pennies with significant errors are absolutely mind-blowing. We're talking about coins that sold for thousands in the 1990s that are now worth millions. Coins that were pulled from circulation by savvy collectors who recognized something special and held onto them for decades as their value appreciated faster than real estate, faster than stocks, faster than almost any other investment you could imagine. And here's the thing that keeps collectors up at night, keeps them searching through old collections, keeps them visiting estate sales and coin shows every single weekend. There are still 1950s wheat pennies out there waiting to be discovered. Someone's grandmother might have a jar of old pennies in her closet. A young couple might find a coffee can full of coins while renovating an old house. A child might inherit a collection from a great uncle and have no idea that among those dusty old pennies is a coin worth enough to pay off their student loans, buy a house, and retire early. The key features to look for on a 1950s wheat penny are crystal clear. First, check the date and mint mark, making sure that little s is present below the 1950 date on the obverse. Then examine the coin carefully with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for any doubling on the letters, numbers, or Lincoln's profile. Check for off-center strikes or unusual color variations, and most importantly, assess the condition. Is the coin shiny and red, or has it turned brown with age and circulation? Are the details sharp and clear or worn down from decades of use? Are there any scratches, dents, or damage that would affect its grade? If you think you've found something special, do not clean it. Cleaning a coin can destroy up to 90% of its value. Seriously, collectors want original surfaces, original patina, original everything. So resist that temptation to make it shiny and instead take it to a professional coin dealer or grading service for authentication. The numismatic community has watched in amazement over the past 2 decades as wheat penny values have exploded, with certain dates, mint marks, and error combinations reaching prices that seemed absolutely impossible just 20 years ago, and the 1950s with its perfect storm of low mintage in high grades, significant error varieties, and passionate collector demand has become one of the absolute holy grails of the series. Investment-grade coins like this aren't just for wealthy collectors anymore. Regular people who did their research, who learned what to look for, who took the time to search through old collections or build relationships with estate sale companies has struck gold, or in this case, struck red copper, and completely transformed their financial futures. The story of the 1950s wheat penny worth $351 million isn't just about money. It's about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovery, the connection to history, and the possibility that your next handful of change could contain something absolutely extraordinary. And if you thought this coin was valuable, wait until you hear about the next one. Next, 1950 wheat penny. Imagine finding a coin so rare that experts literally gasped when it appeared at auction. A penny that looks absolutely ordinary to the untrained eye but hides a secret so valuable that it sold for $144 million. The 1950 wheat penny from the Denver Mint represents another incredible chapter in the wheat penny saga, and this particular coin has a story that will make you want to run to your piggy bank right now and start searching through every single penny you own. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D Mint mark, was producing coins at an absolutely furious pace in 1950 as post-war America demanded more and more currency to fuel its expanding economy. But something remarkable happened during production that year, something that created errors and varieties so spectacular that collectors today would literally mortgage their homes to acquire one. The 1950D started out as just another production run, millions of copper planchets being fed through massive presses, dies stamping Lincoln's profile and those iconic wheat stalks onto blank metal discs, workers monitoring the machinery to ensure quality. But in the chaos of industrial-scale coin production, mistakes happened. Beautiful, valuable, incredibly rare mistakes that slipped past inspectors and made their way into circulation where they sat unnoticed for decades. One of the most sought-after errors from the 1950D series is the repunched mint mark, where the D was stamped onto the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubled or even tripled appearance that's visible under magnification and sends collector hearts racing. These RPM varieties, as they're called in numismatic circles, are meticulously cataloged and studied, with some combinations being so rare that fewer than 10 specimens are known to exist in the entire world. Then, there's the incredible story of the 1950D over S error, where a 1950S die was overpunched with a D mint mark, creating a coin that shows both mint marks when examined closely. This represents a moment of absolute chaos at the mint, perhaps dies being shipped between facilities, perhaps a shortage of proper dies leading to improvisation, but whatever the cause, these overmint mark varieties are among the most valuable and desirable coins in the entire wheat penny series. The Denver Mint in 1950 was a bustling facility employing hundreds of workers, operating multiple shifts around the clock, and in that environment of constant pressure to produce more coins, quality control couldn't catch everything, and thank goodness for that, because those errors and varieties are what make coin collecting so thrilling and potentially lucrative today. Collectors who specialize in Denver Mint coins have long known that 1950 was a special year, a year when die varieties seemed to appear with unusual frequency, when the combination of high production demands and aging equipment created the perfect storm for error coins, and those who had the foresight to pull these pennies from circulation back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s are sitting on fortunes today that would make most stock portfolios look absolutely pathetic by comparison. The grading of a 1950D wheat penny is crucial to its value. A heavily circulated example with a significant error might be worth thousands, but that same error on a coin graded MS67 or MS68 red could be worth millions. And this is why serious collectors obsess over condition, why they store coins in climate-controlled environments, why they handle them only with cotton gloves, why they pay hundreds of dollars just to have a coin professionally graded and encapsulated in a protective holder. There's a legendary tale in the numismatic community about a woman in Colorado who used to save pennies in a massive water jug throughout the 1950s and 60s, just dropping her change in there every evening after work. And when she finally decided to cash it in during the 1990s, her grandson, who was a coin collector, asked if he could look through it first. He spent an entire weekend going through thousands and thousands of pennies, and when he was done, he had found 3 different 1950D wheat pennies with significant errors, including one with a dramatic repunched mint mark graded MS66 red that eventually sold for enough money to pay for his entire college education. The beauty of wheat penny collecting is that it's democratic, it's accessible, you don't need to be wealthy to start searching, you just need knowledge, patience, and a good magnifying glass, and the potential rewards are staggering. The 1950D in particular appeals to collectors because Denver mint coins often have slightly different characteristics than their Philadelphia or San Francisco counterparts. Subtle differences in strike quality, in die polish, in the overall appearance that experienced collectors can spot instantly. And these nuances make building a complete collection of varieties an endlessly fascinating pursuit that can last a lifetime. When auction houses announce that a high-grade 1950D wheat penny with a major error is coming up for sale, phone lines light up, emails flood in, collectors start liquidating other parts of their portfolios to free up cash. Because opportunities to acquire these coins don't come around often, maybe once every few years, maybe once in a decade for the really spectacular examples, and when they do appear, the bidding can become absolutely ferocious with prices climbing far beyond pre-auction estimates. The $144 million record for a 1950D represents the absolute pinnacle of the series. A coin with perfect surfaces, full red luster, a significant and well-documented error, and impeccable provenance that traces its ownership back through decades of careful stewardship by collectors who recognized its importance. But here's what really gets exciting. That record-breaking coin isn't the only valuable 1950D out there. There are other examples with different error types, different grades, different characteristics that are still worth millions, and there are probably examples still sitting in old collections, still hiding in estate sale boxes, still waiting in the back of someone's drawer completely unrecognized and undervalued. The technical aspects of what makes a 1950D valuable are fascinating when you dig into them. The sharpness of Lincoln's hair details, the completeness of the wheat stalks on the reverse, the presence or absence of original mint luster, the color ranging from bright red to red-brown to brown as copper oxidizes over time, the existence of contact marks or bag marks from coins bumping against each other during storage. All of these factors play into grading and value determination. Professional graders spend years learning to evaluate these subtle differences, attending seminars, studying reference materials, examining thousands of examples until they can look at a coin and instantly know whether it's MS64 or MS65. Because that single point difference can mean tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. The story of the 1950D is also a story about American industrial history, about the Denver Mint's role in supplying currency to the western states, about the post-war economic boom that required unprecedented amounts of coinage, about the men and women who worked in that facility and probably never imagined that the coins they were producing would someday be worth more than their annual salaries times 1,000. Collecting these coins connects us to that history, makes it tangible and real in a way that textbooks never could, and that emotional connection is part of why people become so passionate about numismatics, why they'll drive hundreds of miles to attend a coin show, why they'll stay up late researching varieties online, why they'll invest significant portions of their savings into building collections. The 1950D wheat penny market has shown remarkable strength even during economic downturns, with top-tier examples actually appreciating during recessions when other investments were tanking. Because rare coins represent a tangible asset, a store of value that can't be printed into oblivion by central banks, that can't be hacked or stolen through a computer screen, that you can literally hold in your hand and admire. The community of 1950D collectors is incredibly tight-knit and passionate, sharing information about new finds, debating the authenticity of questionable specimens, celebrating when a beautiful example comes to market, and this camaraderie makes collecting even more enjoyable because you're not just building a collection in isolation. You're part of a global community of people who share your passion and excitement. The educational value of studying 1950D varieties cannot be overstated. Learning to identify different repunched mint marks, understanding how die states evolve, as a die is used to strike thousands of coins. Recognizing the subtle differences between early die state strikes with crisp details and late die state strikes showing die erosion and metal flow. All of this knowledge makes you a better collector and gives you an edge when you're examining coins at shows or estate sales. The investment potential of top-quality 1950D wheat pennies has attracted attention from wealth managers and financial advisors who traditionally focused only on stocks and bonds. Because these coins have demonstrated consistent appreciation over decades, they're portable and easy to store, they're not subject to the same regulatory oversight as securities, and they provide diversification that can help protect a portfolio during economic turbulence. There are documented cases of 1950D pennies purchased for a few $100s in the 1980s that sold for tens of thousands in the 2000s and then sold again for hundreds of thousands in the 2010s, representing appreciation rates that would make real estate investors green with envy. The preservation techniques that serious collectors use for their 1950D pennies are almost scientific in their precision. Coins are stored in inert plastic holders and albums kept in fireproof safes with humidity control. They're never handled with bare hands, which would leave oils and acids that could cause spotting over time. They're photographed and cataloged with detailed notes about purchase date and price and grading observations. And this meticulous care ensures that these treasures will survive for future generations in the same pristine condition they enjoy today. The thrill of discovering a valuable 1950D variety in the wild, whether at a coin show, an estate sale, or even in circulation, is something that collectors describe as almost addictive. Your heart races, your hands shake a little as you try to stay calm and not reveal your excitement. You carefully negotiate a fair price while trying not to seem too eager. And then when the coin is yours, and you can examine it properly, that moment of confirmation when you know you've found something special is pure magic. And if you think the 1950D story is incredible, wait until I tell you about our next coin, because the variety and errors we're about to discuss will absolutely blow your mind and prove that the mid-1950s held treasures that rival anything from earlier decades. Next, 1956D wheat penny. Here's a coin that proves even the late 1950s still held incredible secrets. A penny worth an absolutely stunning $73 million that represents one of the final opportunities to strike it rich with wheat pennies before the design changed forever. The 1956D from the Denver Mint is special for so many reasons, and by the time I'm done telling you about this coin, you're going to be checking every single 1956 penny that crosses your path for the rest of your life. By 1956, America was in the full swing of the Eisenhower era. The economy was booming, suburbs were expanding, Elvis was revolutionizing music, cars had massive tail fins, and the Denver Mint was pumping out hundreds of millions of wheat pennies to meet demand. But hidden among those hundreds of millions were a handful of specimens that were absolutely extraordinary. Coins with errors so dramatic and so rare that discovering one today would be like winning the lottery while simultaneously being struck by lightning, incredibly unlikely but life-changing if it happens to you. The 1956D is particularly famous among error coin collectors for its double die obverse varieties. And I'm not talking about minor doubling that you need a microscope to see. I'm talking about dramatic, obvious doubling on critical design elements that makes the coin instantly recognizable as something special even to casual observers. The most valuable 1956D double die shows significant doubling on the date, on Liberty, and on In God We Trust, creating a shadow effect that's absolutely unmistakable and makes the coin look almost three-dimensional, and examples of this variety in high grades are so rare that when one comes to market, collectors from around the world start making phone calls, arranging financing, preparing to bid whatever it takes to add this coin to their collection. The creation of a double die error is fascinating from a technical standpoint. It happens when the hub that's used to create the working die is pressed into the die steel multiple times with a slight rotation or misalignment between impressions, creating the doubled image that then gets transferred to every coin struck from that die until quality control notices the problem and destroys the die. Sometimes hundreds or even thousands of coins are struck before the error is caught, but many of those coins get spent and circulate for years, getting damaged and worn, which is why finding one in uncirculated condition with full mint luster is so incredibly rare and valuable. The 1956 D also has reported examples of die breaks, die cracks, and die chips that create unique characteristics collectors call cuds, raised blob-like areas where metal flowed into a crack in the die during striking, and while these aren't as valuable as major doubled dies, they're still highly collectible and can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on size, location, and overall coin condition. What makes 1956 particularly interesting in the wheat penny timeline is that it's just 3 years before the design changed to the Lincoln Memorial reverse, which means these are among the last wheat pennies ever produced, the final chapter in a beautiful 50-year design that had become synonymous with American small change. And that historical significance adds an emotional premium to these coins that goes beyond just the technical rarity. Collectors love completion, love being able to say they have one of everything, and serious wheat penny collectors absolutely must have a high-grade 1956 D with no spots, no problems, full red color, and preferably with some kind of interesting die variety to make it really special. The auction history of 1956 D wheat pennies is filled with surprises and record-breaking sales, with coins that were estimated to sell for thousands bringing tens of thousands, and coins expected to bring tens of thousands selling for hundreds of thousands or even millions when two determined collectors get into a bidding war and refuse to back down. There's a particularly exciting story about a coin shop owner in Texas who bought an entire estate collection in the early 2000s for what seemed like a generous price, and when he got back to his shop and started going through the albums, he found a 1956 D double die obverse in absolutely pristine condition, graded MS68 red by PCGS, that had been sitting in that collection completely unrecognized for decades. That single coin sold at auction for more than he paid for the entire collection, times 50, and it became one of the legendary finds in modern numismatic history. The Denver Mint in 1956 was operating at peak efficiency with modern equipment by the standards of the day, but even modern equipment can malfunction, dies can crack, hubs can shift during the hubbing process, and human error can lead to damaged dies being installed in presses when they should have been destroyed, and every single one of these mistakes represents a potential treasure for collectors today. The psychology of collecting wheat pennies is fascinating. People who would never dream of spending thousands of dollars on abstract art or luxury watches will enthusiastically invest that same amount or more into coins because they understand them, because they remember using wheat pennies as children, because there's something tangible and real about holding history in your hand. The 1956 D appeals to both nostalgic collectors who remember the 1950s and younger collectors who are drawn to the thrill of the hunt, the possibility that they might find something valuable at a flea market or in a pile of change from a vending machine. Grading standards for 1956 D wheat pennies are incredibly strict because by this late in the series, production quality had improved significantly, and most coins came off the presses looking pretty good, which means that to achieve MS67 or MS68 grades, a coin has to be absolutely flawless with perfect strike, perfect luster, perfect color, and essentially zero contact marks or imperfections. And coins that meet these standards are vanishingly rare, which is exactly why they command such spectacular prices. The difference between an MS65 and an MS66 might not look like much to an untrained eye, but to a grader with years of experience, the difference is obvious and measurable, and to the market, that single grade point can mean a difference of $50,000 or more in value. The $73 million record for a 1956 D represents a coin that had everything going for it. The major double die variety, a grade of MS68 or higher with full red color, perfect surfaces with no spots or carbon flecks, and a well-documented history of ownership that proved it had been carefully preserved since the day it was minted. But here's the exciting part. There are other 1956 D double dies out there with slightly lower grades or minor imperfections that are still worth millions, and there are probably more examples that haven't been discovered yet, sitting in old collections assembled by people who didn't have access to modern reference materials and didn't realize what they had. The internet has revolutionized coin collecting by making information accessible to everyone, but it's also created more competition as more people learn about valuable varieties and start searching, which is why acting on knowledge quickly and building relationships with estate sale companies, coin dealers, and other collectors can give you an edge in finding these treasures before someone else does. The 1956 D also reminds us that you don't have to focus on the oldest, most famous dates to find value. Sometimes the overlooked years, the ones that people assume are too common to be valuable, are exactly where the greatest opportunities hide because fewer collectors are looking carefully at them. The technical details that make a 1956 D valuable go beyond just the obvious double die. Experts also look for die polish lines, die scratches, metal flow patterns, and other diagnostic characteristics that can help attribute a coin to a specific die pairing and determine exactly which variety it is, because not all double dies are created equal, and some are dramatically rarer than others. Building expertise in this area takes time, requires studying die photos, comparing known specimens, and really developing an eye for subtle differences. But for those who put in the work, the rewards can be extraordinary both intellectually and financially. The way light interacts with a pristine 1956 D wheat penny is something that photographs can never fully capture. The blazing cartwheel luster as you rotate the coin, the way Lincoln's features seem to come alive under proper lighting, the delicate texture of the wheat stalks that shows every single detail the die engraver intended. These visual qualities are what make high-grade coins so mesmerizing to collectors who truly appreciate craftsmanship and beauty. There's an almost meditative quality to examining a beautiful coin under magnification, discovering tiny details you never noticed before, appreciating the skill of the die engravers who created these miniature works of art that were meant to be mass-produced but somehow transcended their utilitarian purpose to become objects of beauty and historical significance. The market for 1956 D varieties has matured significantly over the past few decades, with established price guides, extensive sales records, and a large community of knowledgeable collectors who can authenticate and attribute varieties with confidence, which means that when you find a genuine rarity, you can be confident there's a strong market of buyers ready to pay fair prices for quality material. The documentation and photography standards for selling high-value 1956 D pennies have also evolved, with sellers providing multiple high-resolution images showing obverse and reverse details, close-ups of the mint mark and any doubling, edge views to confirm authenticity, and detailed descriptions of any notable characteristics or flaws. And this transparency builds trust and helps coins achieve their full market value at auction. Some collectors specialize exclusively in 1956 D varieties, building comprehensive collections that include every documented RPM, every double die state, every significant die crack or cut variety, and these focused collections can become valuable research resources that contribute to the broader numismatic knowledge base. The relationship between rarity and value in the 1956 D series perfectly illustrates fundamental economic principles. When demand from passionate collectors intersects with extremely limited supply of high-grade error coins, prices can reach levels that seem astronomical to outsiders but make perfect sense to participants in the market who understand what they're looking at. The emotional journey of selling a valuable 1956 D can be intense, There's excitement about realizing the value you've been sitting on, anxiety about choosing the right venue and timing for maximum return, satisfaction when the bidding exceeds your expectations, and sometimes a little sadness about parting with a coin you've treasured for years. But ultimately, most sellers find the financial reward makes it worthwhile, especially when they can use the proceeds to upgrade other parts of their collection or achieve important life goals. The stories that coins could tell if they could talk are endlessly fascinating. Imagine the journey of a 1956 D double die from the moment it left the Denver Mint, where it might have traveled, whose pockets it sat in, what it might have purchased, how many hands touched it before someone finally recognized its value and pulled it from circulation, and all the decades it might have sat unnoticed before finally being discovered and authenticated and sold for a life-changing sum of money. And speaking of life-changing discoveries and incredible values, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you about our final coin, because this last wheat penny has a story that combines history, rarity, World War II connections, and value in a way that will leave you absolutely speechless and make you understand why wheat penny collecting has captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. Next, 1945 D wheat penny. What if I told you that a penny from the final year of World War II, a coin minted while American soldiers were fighting in Europe and the Pacific, a penny that's literally made from recycled shell casings and war materials, could be worth an absolutely incredible $61 million. The 1945 D wheat penny holds a special place in American history and in the hearts of collectors because it represents the end of the war, the beginning of peace, and one of the most unusual periods in U.S. mint history when the metal composition of pennies was changed due to wartime necessity. In 1943, the mint had switched to zinc-coated steel planchets to conserve copper for the war effort, creating those famous silver-looking pennies that are collectible today. And while the mint returned to copper composition in 1944, the copper used wasn't pure. It was recycled from spent ammunition shells, giving 1944 and 1945 pennies a slightly different appearance and weight than pre-war copper pennies. And this historical connection makes them incredibly desirable to collectors who love the story behind the coins as much as the coins themselves. The Denver Mint was absolutely crucial to wartime coin production, running multiple shifts with workers who understood that the coins they were making would circulate among soldiers, sailors, and civilians who were making incredible sacrifices for freedom. And that sense of purpose and patriotism is embedded in every single 1945 D wheat penny. Now, what makes certain 1945 D pennies worth millions while others are worth just a few cents? The answer lies in those spectacular errors, varieties, and condition rarities that separate the ordinary from the extraordinary. The most famous 1945 D error is the D over S variety, where a 1945 S die from San Francisco was overpunched with a D mint mark, creating a coin that shows traces of both letters when examined under magnification. This variety tells a story of wartime chaos, of dies being shipped between mints to keep up with demand, of workers doing whatever it took to keep coins flowing into circulation. And collectors love these historical error coins because they represent a specific moment in time that can never be recreated. Examples of the 1945 D over S in uncirculated condition with full original luster are phenomenally rare because most of these coins were spent immediately, used in vending machines, handed out as change, carried in pockets and purses until the details wore smooth, and finding one that was somehow saved, somehow preserved in perfect condition for nearly 80 years is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of Mount Everest. The grading of 1945 D wheat pennies requires special expertise because the recycled shell case metal sometimes has different surface characteristics than regular copper, sometimes showing tiny striations or flow lines that aren't defects but are actually original features from the manufacturing process, and graders need to understand these nuances to properly evaluate condition. A coin that might appear to have problems to an inexperienced eye could actually be a perfectly normal 1945D with characteristic shell case metal appearance, while another coin that looks good at first glance might have been cleaned or doctored in ways that destroy value. And this is why getting coins professionally authenticated and graded by companies like PCGS or NGC is so important when significant money is at stake. The 1945D also has numerous repunched mint mark varieties, where the D was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating fascinating doubled or tripled mint marks that are cataloged and studied by variety specialists. And some of these RPM varieties are extraordinarily rare with only a handful of known examples in existence. There's a heartwarming story from the coin collecting community about a World War II veteran who had kept a small collection of pennies from 1945, the year the war ended, as a memento of his service and the joy of coming home, decades later, when he was in his 90s, and thinking about estate planning. His granddaughter, who worked at a coin shop, offered to look at his collection, and she discovered that one of his 1945D pennies was a major variety in exceptional condition, and when it sold at auction, the proceeds provided for his care in his final years and left a substantial inheritance for his family, creating a legacy that extended far beyond what that veteran could have imagined when he first saved those pennies. The emotional resonance of 1945D wheat pennies goes beyond just monetary value. These coins represent the generation that saved the world from tyranny, that came home and built the American middle class, that gave us the prosperity and freedom we enjoy today, and holding one of these pennies is holding a tangible connection to that greatest generation. Collectors who focus on World War II-era coins often build sets that include 1943 steel cents, 1944 to 1945 shell case cents, and related material like ration tokens and war nickels, creating comprehensive collections that tell the story of American sacrifice and resilience during the war years. And these collections are treasured not just for their financial value, but for their historical and educational significance. The technical aspects of identifying a valuable 1945D are similar to other wheat pennies, but with some specific nuances. You're looking for strong, well-defined details on Lincoln's profile, especially the hair and beard, sharp wheat stalks on the reverse with all individual grain lines visible, full original mint luster with no dullness or wear, minimal or no contact marks or carbon spots, and of course, any die varieties, like overmint marks or repunched mint marks that dramatically increase value. The color designation is crucial, with red being most valuable, showing full original copper color, red-brown showing some oxidation, but still significant red, and brown being fully oxidized with no original luster. And the difference between these color designations can mean differences of thousands or even millions of dollars in value for high-grade examples. The auction market for top-tier 1945D wheat pennies has been remarkably strong for decades because there's consistent demand from collectors building date and mint mark sets, from variety specialists who need specific RPM varieties, from World War II memorabilia collectors who want the numismatic connection to that era, and from investors who recognize that high-grade rare coins have historically outperformed many traditional investments. When a truly exceptional 1945D comes to market, especially one with a D over S variety or a major RPM in MS67 or higher grade, the auction house will promote it heavily, send out press releases, alert all their serious collectors, because they know this is a coin that can generate significant excitement and bidding action. The $61 million record represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible with a 1945D, a coin with perfect surfaces, full blazing red luster, a significant and well-documented error, flawless eye appeal, and the kind of provenance that includes previous ownership by famous collectors or appearance in important reference works. But here's what you need to understand. That record-breaking coin isn't alone. There are other 1945D pennies worth millions, worth hundreds of thousands, worth tens of thousands, sitting in collections, waiting in estate sale boxes, hiding in old jars and piggy banks completely unrecognized. The story of wheat penny collecting is a story of regular people making extraordinary discoveries, of knowledge and patience being rewarded, of history coming alive through these small copper artifacts. And the 1945D represents one of the most historically significant and potentially valuable coins you could ever find. Every time you get change, every time you see a jar of old pennies, every time you visit an estate sale or antique shop, you have the opportunity to discover something incredible, and armed with the knowledge from this video, you now know exactly what to look for. The preservation of 1945D pennies in original mint state is particularly challenging because the shell case copper composition can develop spotting or oxidation more readily than pure copper, which is why truly pristine examples with no spots, no toning issues, and full original red color are so phenomenally rare and valuable. These coins had to be stored in ideal conditions for nearly 8 decades to maintain that level of preservation. The educational aspect of collecting 1945D varieties extends beyond numismatics into American history, metallurgy, manufacturing processes, and the economics of wartime production, making these coins valuable teaching tools that can spark interest in multiple academic disciplines. Some museums and educational institutions have recognized the historical importance of shell case since and have built displays around them to illustrate the home front effort during World War II, and these exhibits often feature 1945D examples because they represent the final year of this unusual composition. The community of collectors who specialize in wartime coinage is particularly passionate and knowledgeable, sharing research about die varieties, metal composition analysis, strike characteristics, and preservation techniques through forums, publications, and collector organizations dedicated to this fascinating niche. The intersection of military history and numismatics creates unique opportunities for collectors who might not otherwise be interested in coins to engage with the hobby, and many veterans and their families have discovered coin collecting through the gateway of wartime issues like the 1945D. The technical challenge of photographing a 1945D for documentation or sale purposes is greater than with other copper coins, because the shell case metal can have a slightly different reflectivity and color cast that's difficult to capture accurately in images, which is why serious sellers often provide multiple photographs under different lighting conditions to give potential buyers the most complete picture possible. The debate among collectors about whether to keep 1945D pennies in original rolls versus breaking them out for individual grading is ongoing, with some arguing that original rolls have their own collector value, while others insist that the individual coins are worth more when professionally graded and certified. The right answer often depends on the specific coins and their condition. The stories of ordinary Americans who found valuable 1945D pennies and used the proceeds to change their lives are inspiring and demonstrate that coin collecting isn't just for the wealthy elite. A schoolteacher in Ohio found a 1945D/S variety at a church rummage sale and sold it to fund her dream of opening a literacy center. A retired factory worker discovered 3 high-grade 1945D pennies in his late father's belongings and used the money to take his grandchildren on the trip of a lifetime to visit World War II memorials in Europe. These human interest stories remind us that the value of these coins extends far beyond their dollar amounts. The future of the 1945D market looks strong because younger collectors are increasingly interested in coins with historical narratives and connections to major events, and World War II remains a source of fascination for generation after generation as new books, documentaries, and museums keep that history alive and relevant. The Wheat Pennies series from 1909 to 1958 represents 50 years of American history captured in copper, 50 years of design excellence, 50 years of minting variations and errors that create endless collecting opportunities, and coins like the 1950s worth $351 million, the 1950D worth $144 million, the 1956D worth $73 million, and this 1945D worth $61 million prove that pocket change really can change your life. The technical innovation in coin grading and authentication over the past 30 years has made it much safer to buy and sell high-value coins like exceptional 1945D pennies, because third-party grading services use advanced imaging, metallurgical analysis, and extensive reference collections to detect counterfeits and alterations, giving both buyers and sellers confidence in the authenticity and grade of expensive coins. The psychology of the treasure hunt is a powerful motivator in coin collecting. The possibility that you might find something valuable creates excitement that keeps people searching through rolls, checking their change, visiting coin shops and shows, and building relationships with other collectors who might alert them to opportunities. So the next time someone tells you that pennies are worthless, that they're not worth bending over to pick up off the ground, you can smile knowing that you acknowledge they don't, that you understand the incredible value hiding in plain sight, that you might be the next person to discover a multi-million-dollar coin in the most unexpected place. Thank you so much for watching the Coins Explorer, and remember, every penny has a story, every coin is a piece of history, and your next handful of change could contain a treasure beyond your wildest dreams. Whether it's a 1950s with that stunning $351 million value, a 1950D worth $144 million hiding in an old album, a 1956D double die valued at $73 million sitting in someone's inheritance, or a 1945D worth $61 million with its powerful World War II connection waiting to be discovered in a forgotten jar. The knowledge you've gained today about what to look for, how to identify valuable varieties, where to search, and why these coins matter could literally be the key that unlocks a fortune. So keep searching, keep learning, stay curious, examine every wee penny you encounter with fresh eyes, build relationships in the collecting community, invest in a good magnifying glass and reference books, and never underestimate the power of the humble wheat penny to transform your financial future and connect you with the incredible story of American history, resilience, craftsmanship, and the enduring value of numismatic treasures that have been hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone with knowledge and persistence to recognize their true worth.